Hi, welcome to Neil's Cookery. So today we're going to be making dog food, and the way we're going to make the dog food is built around a single protein. It's really important to start with a good protein and a high quality protein. So today we'll be making a dish that's based on pork. Pork is a great meat because it's actually very lean. So American pork is some of the leanest pork that you can get in the world. They're specially bred to make sure that the animal has some fat, but actually also is mostly good, high quality lean meat. We're also going to add in some carbs. And for us today, we're going to be using sweet potatoes. Sweet potatoes are a great carb. Highly recommend sweet potatoes over white potatoes, largely because they have a little bit of sugar content, which will give the dog some energy. And actually it's very high nutrition and also a good probiotic, so it actually helps with their gut health. So what we're going to do first is we're going to get a good sized pot, and we're going to take each of our sweet potatoes, and we're not going to peel them. These I've already washed these. We're not going to peel them. We're going to use peel and all, and we'll first cut these. I'm going to use just a regular chef's knife here, and I'm first going to cut this way, then this way, and then this way. And our goal here is to actually create equal sizes that are about, I'd say about an inch, inch and a half in size. So each piece is about this big, okay? Now, what we're gonna do is we're gonna put all of these into a single pot. Now, there's different theories and beliefs about boiling water before you add your vegetable in, or whether you add the potatoes or whatever it is that you're boiling first. I am of the school of thought that if you add the stuff in first, as the water heats up, the food actually starts to warm up. And so we're just going to continue on. Dice up all of our sweet potatoes, put them all into the pot. Now, as you're doing this, it's really important to remember the sweet potatoes cannot go into a food processor. We'll be using the food processor for many other things, but for sweet potatoes, you have to cut them by hand. And we do this step first because it takes about 15 or 20 minutes for the sweet potatoes to fully cook. So there I have all my potatoes. And what I'm going to do now is just fill the water up so it just gets slightly above where the potatoes are in the bowl, in the pot. And I'm going to use a little bit of iodized sea salt. It's not so much for flavor because dogs really can't taste the same way that we do, but it's more for the iodine. That's actually really important for health. We'll just set that on to high. And we'll let that cook for about 20 minutes. So while the sweet potatoes are cooking, now I'm going to look at the meat. And this is where the food processor comes in. So now I'm going to switch my knife from a chef's knife to a butcher's knife. And when you're cutting meat, this is actually the real kind of knife to use because it's a bigger blade and it's extremely sharp. You can get them very easily from any Asian market. So what we're going to do here is we're first going to cut these up into reasonable sizes. And today we're actually making a dog food that is going to be more like mush. Think about canned dog food. So we'll be blending this food down. And some folks will tell you that dog food needs to be pieces of meat and stuff that a dog can chew. That's absolutely categorically false. Actually, meat that's grinded up, and actually almost all the food that we're doing today is grinded up, is actually more of those nutrients are actually going to get into the animal than if you were to not. Add the meat in. All you need is about 5 seconds to pulverize it. And what we're going to first do is add some oil into a very large pot. And actually, you can use oil, but I recommend using something called ghee, which is clarified butter. Now, clarified butter is extremely full of high quality fats that actually, if you use regularly with your animals, will lead to very shiny skin. So just put some of that in there. And then all we're going to do now is we're going to go through all of the chunks of meat and process them through the food processor so they get grinded up and added in. Okay, so next up is gizzards and hearts, and actually basically organ meats, oftentimes referred to as offal. And what we're going to do here is just take this offal. This is actually chicken. These are gizzards. There's some hearts in here. Here's some hearts and gizzards. And so we're just going to toss these in and food processor them up. Any supermarket should have these. You can also go to your butcher. They will have them in plenty. And again, we'll just pulse these down about 10 seconds. Add that in. And then I also have some liver here. Chicken liver that will also pulse up. That needs about 3 seconds. Pulses up real quick, becomes a liquidy, goopy mess. Just pour that in there. So now what we have here is basically a mixture of our ground pork, our ground organ meat, and our pulverized liver. We're going to put this now onto the stove. At about medium-low heat. I'll cover that up. And then we'll come back over. And I'm going to grab a bowl here to put the next ingredients in as I grind them up. Now, many times people will tell you that dogs are related to wolves. And that's taxonomically true, but that doesn't mean that dogs are wolves. And lately we've seen an increasing movement of individuals wanting to feed their dogs raw meat with the argument that wolves eat raw meat, so dogs should eat raw meat. Well, the fact of the matter is dogs have been co-evolving with humans for a very, very long time, like tens of thousands of years, almost 20,000 years. And in that time, they've lost a lot of their wild ability to actually ingest raw foods. And even though you can eat raw foods or feed your dogs raw foods, and they can acclimate and do okay on them, they are still at high risk of getting many diseases, infections, that actually, even if they don't exhibit those diseases, you or your family members or anyone living in your household can actually get things like salmonella poisoning or E. coli poisoning. And so that's why I highly, highly recommend you always cook your food. And anyone who tells you that cooking raw food to your dog is a much better and more natural solution is absolutely wrong. There's just no two ways about it. The second thing that's also really important to know is that when you cook food, you not only destroy many of the microbes that may be living in amongst the food, you actually make the food more palatable, and actually just like it is for humans. And palatability is really important. And again, raw meats and the like, humans can eat raw food as well, but if you eat too much raw food, you can also increase your risk for infection. So there's a lot of merits. We could go on for hours and hours talking about why you should cook your food before you serve it. Now, with all that being said, that's more appropriate for the meat side of our cooking when we're cooking for dogs. On the vegetable side, it's more important that the ingredients are available as close to raw, but slightly cooked in a way that enough of the nutrients are released from the vegetables or other ingredients, but also allows for the food to be digested. And also another thing that is becoming an increasing and worrisome movement is meat-only diets for dogs. Dogs are carnivores taxonomically, which means by biology they are very much like carnivores, but because they have co-evolved with humans for so long, they actually rely on some of their nutrients coming from vegetables. And so generally speaking, a 50-50 ratio is good. You could go as high as 60 or 70% meat, and then the balanced 20 to 40% vegetable. I tend to be closer to 50-50 because it also helps with increasing quality of stool, as well as ensuring that the animal gets all the nutrients that they want. And so we'll start with a couple of things. And with vegetables for dogs, it actually helps you manage your household in many ways, because you get to take stuff that you might have thrown away and you actually can repurpose them. So I have here some greens from beets that my family were planning to eat later this week. I just cut the beet heads off, and the leaves, I'm just gonna chop them up a little bit here and then put them into my food processor. And you want to pulverize these down as much as you can. About 5 seconds does the trick. And so a lot of the vegetables, when you're making them as you're cooking at home, you can save all the odds and ends. And actually that's exactly what much of my vegetables today are odds and ends from the various ingredients that we're using in our house for cooking with. And so rather than throw them away or compost them, you can actually add them in to your dog's diet. And so this is the rest of the beets. Now there's one ingredient that I buy fresh every week that as I can, and that's mushrooms. Mushrooms are an amazing food ingredient for humans, but also for our four-legged friends as well. Many, many health benefits to mushrooms, and so I buy these from my large discount store. Place those down for about 10 seconds. Now another thing to keep mindful of, because we could go through what other ingredients you should use, a good rule of thumb is cook by color. So I have a little bit of red from the beets, from the beet stems. I have some green, and now I'm going to add some brown. And what you really want in the end is just a colorful bounty of ingredients. And that's actually a good rule for us humans too, is don't worry so much about which vegetables you're eating or which fruits you're eating. Make sure you're eating a full palette of color. And of course, before all these ingredients were washed. I have some fresh salad cucumbers, or I think these are called pickling cucumbers. I'll throw those in. I also have some celery here. I'll chop up. And then lastly, as I was alluding to before, well, penultimately actually, we'll get to the last secret ingredient in just a second. That won't be much of a secret in just a few minutes. So as the week goes by, I am peeling things, I'm cutting ends of vegetables off. That's all tasty goodness for dogs and to put into dog food. So don't let anything go to waste. So here I have some bits of cabbage from earlier in the week. And I just stick them in a Ziploc bag, a freezer-safe Ziploc bag, and stick it in the freezer. I have some tomatoes here, some potato peels. Peels are great because they actually have a lot of nutrition in them. I have some asparagus ends. This looks like romaine lettuce. some more tomatoes, some more asparagus, some more beets. Apparently we eat a lot of beets in our house. Okay, we'll fill that up. The other thing to be mindful of is because this was also in the freezer, almost all the water content in these vegetables has turned to ice. And so you end up with these little mini ice bits, but that's all fine. It'll all just melt down when it goes into the food. So that's all blended down. Oh, there's some bits of beans in there as well. Now, the last secret but not so secret ingredient that I like to put in my dog food are oranges. These are mandarin oranges. They were on sale for whatever, for a bag. But these are great for two reasons. One, they have vitamin C, which is a great thing for dogs and humans. Humans also because we don't produce vitamin C naturally. And also the peels have just so much nutrition in them. But not just from a nutrition perspective do we like oranges, they also smell nice. Now, at least me, when I buy commercial dog food and canned food, one of my least favorite things to do before I started making my own food was to smell dog food. Dog's food stinks. And actually, if you make homemade food, it's also not going to smell very nice because it's raw food, raw ingredients. The oranges cut right through that odor and make your food actually smell okay. I tossed in 3 mandarins, and so if you have regular navel oranges or something like that, it would be probably the equivalent of just 1 orange. And that's all you need. And you'll notice I put the whole thing in. Those are obviously seedless. If they are seeded, you will have to go through the extra effort of taking the seeds out. Seeds are not good for your pets or for you to eat. Not as poisonous as things like apple seeds, but still, you do want to take the seeds out, and then we apply that, and that gives me a little bit of orange to my color for my meal for my dog's meal this week. All right, so with all that, the last thing that I'm going to do in prep, well, everything else over there was quick, so I'll just put this over here for storage, is now I'm going to pull out my handy grinder. I'm going to put my cutting board away. I won't need this anymore. So the other thing that you shouldn't throw away is make sure you eat a couple of eggs every week. My household has 3 people in it. Well, I guess we had 3 eggs this week. So between 3 to 6 eggs. Usually we have 3 or 6 eggs each week. You save the shells. Save them in the fridge. Rinse them out first, then just put them in the shell. In their shells as they are, just in your fridge. That's fine. If it's going to be longer than a week, you can put them in the freezer. And what you want to make sure is that as you're taking your eggshells, is that the inside actually has a very strong layer of protein, which is very valuable, and the outside is pure calcium. So we'll just crush this into, this is a simple coffee grinder or spice grinder, whatever you want to call it. Put it in there. And we're just going to give a little shake. And that just blends down to a powder. Now, calcium is really important for humans as well as for our animal family members, because calcium not only helps your bones get nice and strong, it helps you get nutrients out of other parts of your meal. It's really important to have a good calcium and phosphorus balance in your meal. And now remember that there are certain meats, like pork, that are actually high in phosphorus. And so as a result, you need to make sure you're giving some extra calcium into your meals so that the meat can be processed properly. If you don't put enough calcium in, especially your dog's diet, because remember, even though we are treating them as omnivores, they are still also carnivores, and carnivores depend on actually chewing down bones. And so unless you're feeding your animals raw bones, which you have to be careful with, and so I'm not going to make a statement on whether that's a good or bad thing to do, but they do need to get a source of calcium, and eggshells are just a great source for that. And so I just threw that into my vegetable mix, And now I'm going to walk back over to the stove and see how things are going over there. I'm first going to grab a fork as I'm over here. And what I'm going to first do is test the sweet potatoes. If I can put a fork through it very easily, that's done. So I'll turn that stove off. And then over here, with the meat, I'm going to give it a quick stir. Just mix everything up a little bit. And what should be happening now is some of the fat should be rendering from the meat, and it'll actually be creating a little bit of liquid. Okay. I'll let that keep cooking. It's going to get some water now. I've got 2 cups of water that I'm going to add, just to add a little bit of moisture. There'll be more moisture coming from the sweet potatoes as well as from the vegetables themselves. What I'm going to do now is get my immersion blender. And I'll bring this over to here. So we'll move this aside for now. These are the vegetables. What I have here now are my sweet potatoes that have been tested with a fork, that they are very soft. And what we're going to do now is use an immersion blender. What we're basically going to do is turn this into a sweet potato puree. And after you're done, it should look just like a nice silky puree. I blended the peels in so that they're actually in there. If you don't blend the peels in, actually it'll be a problem for your dog, because peels, especially sweet potato peels, are not digestible in their uncooked, but definitely actually in their full form. But you puree them down, it's not a problem at all. And actually they're full of just great nutrients for your dog. So we'll come back to this in a few moments. That's all set. Take one more look at our food over here. Now, while I did say that raw food is not something that we want to be giving our pets, we also don't want to overcook the food. This is actually true for humans as well. Overcooking food will actually reduce the nutrient content of food. And so you want to find that balance point where you're just cooking it to the point that it is no longer unsafe. And it's recommended, that's why we're cooking at a medium to low heat and not a medium to high or high heat, is that we're cooking at a temperature that cooks the meat slowly. And this will take about 15 or 20 more minutes, I'd say, and actually all the meat will look like it's cooked at that time. So until then, we just wait. All right, so about 20-25 minutes have gone by, and our meat has just achieved this light brown color. Basically, it's lost the pinkness, and that's about the point where you want to stop. There might be a little bit of pink, but I wouldn't fret too much, because this is cooked enough now that the microbes that could potentially cause one to get sick are now no longer there. Okay, so about 20 minutes have elapsed, and we're taking a look at our meat, and it's mostly brown, almost no pink, which means they're done. I'm going to grab the sweet potato from before. that's now been pulverized. I'm just going to pour that right in. And we'll just nicely fold that in gently. Turn the stove off. And what we're going to add now are our vegetables. Just scoop it in gently. Just pile them all on there. And you're just gently going to fold them in to the food, into the meat. And what's going to happen now is, even though the stove is no longer on, the vegetables cook just lightly in the heat that's left over from cooking the meat. And so we'll fold this all in and let this sit for about 10 minutes. And then we'll do the last step, which will be to immersion blend all of this together. That's all nicely mixed in. Put the cover on and leave it for about 10 minutes. All right, so about 10 minutes, 10 or 15 minutes have gone by, and you'll see the vegetables have actually become very soft and integrated in with the rest of the meat. I'm now going to take this back over to my counter. And what we're going to do now is immersion blend this. And this is going to come down to you, and more importantly, your dog's preference. And I tend to give our dogs some variety. Sometimes I'll fully immersion blender it, sometimes I'll leave it like this. And sometimes I will actually leave bigger pieces of meat in. But for today, we're going to immersion blend it so it gets very much like canned dog food. That's it. Should take about 2 to 3 minutes. Let me get that done. It doesn't have to be perfect. I mean, as long as it's mostly pulverized. What will happen is, as it cools in your fridge, it'll actually become more solid, very much like canned dog food. Okay, so next what we're going to do is we're going to take our food and we're going to portion it out into individual pieces and into individual servings. And what I do for convenience is I have 2 colored and sized containers. These are takeaway containers. You can buy these at a discount store, or restaurant supply stores will have these, or you can buy them online as well. I have 2 different size containers, as well as 2 different colors. The 2 colors actually help me remember which dog the food goes to, even though the food is mostly the same. There are going to be some supplemental differences that I'll get to in a moment that are slightly different. The other is, one dog is slightly bigger than the other. I have a 60-pound dog and a 40-pound dog, and so this helps me remember which one is bigger and smaller. I also have a handy food scale here that I'll be using to weigh out the food. Now, when you feed your dogs, it's important to feed by their weight, and based on the weight of the protein that's in the food that you have. And you can estimate that the protein weight's about half of what you have if you did about a 50-50 mix like I did here. And what you're going to want to do is estimate between 1 to 2%, closer to 2% to start out, to determine how much food to give your animal. And so it will depend on your animal's activity as well as their ability to metabolize food. And so it'll probably take at least 3 or 4 months till you actually find out what the right amount is. But once you find that amount, you should check in with your veterinarian to make sure that they're actually hitting a good body score, body condition score. A good body condition score is going to be between 4 and 5. aiming for a 4.5 ideally, which is just so that you can just see the ribs and the animal actually has a nice dip above their hip. To get to that, it's going to be all about the right portions. And you can adjust this, as I said, very easily week to week. I do recommend giving 2 weeks at a time before you make any adjustments in volume. And you can also talk to your veterinarian about what would be the recommended amount of food for your dog. And so I will just portion this out. And eventually also, actually, if you do this enough times, you get a sense of how many scoops equates to how much weight. And so I'll set up that one. And then this one. Okay, now that we're done serving all the food out into individual portions, what I did do is that I had an extra container of food and I want to have an even distribution, and part of it so that it makes my life easier, so that I remember I just have a pair per meal time. So each of these is a meal collectively, so I make sure I have doubles up, and it's okay if some days one of the dogs is going to get a little extra food, one little extra spoon here and there. It's not going to wreak havoc on them. And so unless your dog has a serious clinical condition where you actually do have to monitor how much specific food you're giving, it's okay to have a slight 5% variance of the 1 to 2% percent of food weight that you're giving your animal. Now, you could stop here, but it's highly recommended that you provide some additional supplements, because while this is very much a complete diet with a good quality protein, in this case we use pork, and a good mixture of vitamins that probably covers the full spectrum of nutrients that would come from those vitamins for the animal, it's always good to have a little bit of extra support. And to do that, we have a couple of supplements. The first is a multivitamin. There are a number that are on the market. This is one that I use, and there's various dosings that are associated with each type of supplement, and I have chosen the path of simplicity, where all my vitamins, actually I just use a half of a teaspoon for each, and so I will be giving a half of teaspoon of this supplement to every meal. And this is a multivitamin, which very much like for humans, good to take a multivitamin each day. Doesn't matter which brand. So the second thing that I uniformly recommend adding to all of your dog food is nutritional yeast. It's a great source of various vitamin Bs, which are hard to get other ways. And so I recommend adding, again, a half a teaspoon of this for my dogs, which is the right amount. And this will vary, the amount of supplement that you add will vary depending on the weight of your dog, but a half a teaspoon works of this. Okay, so the next two items that I'm going to add, I'm not going to go into detail about what they are, but they are specific to my dogs based on recommendations that I've gotten either from a nutritionist or a herbalist. We do give our dogs some herbs to handle some of the things that help them with their conditions. I'm not going to go into details what those are, but that'll be specific to you. But I'm going to go ahead and add those in now to the rest of the dog food. Again, just a half teaspoon each. Okay, that's about it. The last item that I'm going to add are frozen blueberries. So I recommend buying frozen blueberries. You can buy them at your grocery store, also in value stores. You can buy them in bulk and just put in a few, 3 to 4 or 5 blueberries. Blueberries are a great antioxidant, and it's okay if the count's not exact. One of the things you'll notice is that as I'm adding things here, I'm not being incredibly precise. It's close enough, and that's okay. And so there you have it, folks. We have our dog food here made pork-based with a variety of vegetables, some supplements added at the end along with some blueberries, and portioned out and ready to go for at least a week, week and a half. Thanks for watching, everybody.